tonight. Joining me live, trial attorney David Otunga, criminal defense attorney Ian Friedman, both joining us via Skype, and trial attorney Amanda Lewis joining us by phone. A warm welcome to all three of you. Thank you so much for being on the program and lending us your expertise. Okay, so first thing I want to do is talk about whether more charges could be coming in this case, because it seems that we've got all these investigations happening in different jurisdictions, 2 dead children, autopsy results pending. And I'm wondering tonight, do we think these charges against Chad and Lori that have come out new this week are an indication that investigators are getting closer and closer to homicide charges? David Otunga, I want to toss that question at you first, please.
Yes, I think we can definitely expect more charges coming. And I think that these new charges that were brought this week is a positive step in the right direction. Look, this is a bizarre story. Everybody knows these two are guilty. But it's a matter of finding enough evidence so the prosecution can prove that. It's not so much that we know that they're guilty. They have to be able to prove it. And so I think as more and more evidence becomes uncovered, I think it's going to move closer and closer to a murder charge.
David, thank you so much. Ian Friedman, I've got a tough one for you. You practice criminal defense in the Cleveland, Ohio area. And if you were on this case, I want to ask you, let's just say you were given the responsibility of defending Mr. Doomsday, Chad Daybell. What would you be doing right now in preparation to take that case to court and defend it potentially to a jury?
All right, well, Julie, good evening. First question, if I'm representing Mr. Daybell, I'm going to be taking steps to get rid of Lori's attorney, Mr. Means, because as you know, he represented Mr. Daybell as well at one of the earlier proceedings. So in anticipation that there could be an adversarial defense, I'm going to be moving to get rid of him. He should not have represented both people. Next thing I'm going to do is start getting out and talking to all of these witnesses, Melanie Gibb, the friend, and just really trying to ascertain through a private investigator all of the statements while I can. Of course, we're going to be waiting for the forensics, for the pathology, for all of the cellular and digital forensics. It's going to be a good wait and see to determine what evidence the law enforcement is able to get in the case. But what I can do is go and try and get all of the statements right now.
Yes. Ian, thank you so much. Amanda Lewis, next one is for you, please. In addition to being a trial attorney, you also have lots of expertise in the area of family law. And we've asked you to comb over those documents in this case, those divorce documents between Charles Vallow and Lori Vallow Daybell. These documents filed around February of last year. Tell us what jumped out at you, please.
Thanks, Julie, and good evening. You know, looking at these documents, initially they looked like what I'd say was a common divorce filing, but you don't go very far before you find what I thought was a rather disturbing motion for temporary orders. That's a typical filing in a divorce, but this motion is just caked full of detail after detail of Lori Vallow, and so disturbing. This is an odd case, a scary case to begin with, but the details about her mental health and her lack of wellness here was really disturbing. Dad was asking for supervised visits between Lori, and the details that are throughout this motion are really, really disturbing. Like I said, it points out to a number of different things, her inability to care for herself, her lack of solid mental health, and things like she took away JJ's service dog collar, his medication, his iPad, things that this child needed for his own well-being, she refused to return. So you didn't have to dig very far into these documents to find really disturbing facts.
Absolutely. You're absolutely right, Amanda. You know, one of the things in those documents, one of many disturbing, sickening details, and to your point, there are so many, but one I wanted to bounce off all of you in our think tank tonight. There was a point in it where I'm reading verbatim here. This says, quote, "Mother also informed father that she is a translated being who cannot taste death, sent by God to lead the 144,000 into the millennium." So Lori Vallow Daybell thinks she's God. My goodness. I mean, okay, David Otunga, tell me, let's just say you are the prosecutor on this case. How do you take some of these facts that pertain to religion with both of these two? Let's say you get to try the lovely couple together on this case. How do you wrap in some of these facts that we've learned into a theme maybe for the case and into a potential motive when you point the finger at both of them?
Well, if I were prosecuting it, I would take all of this stuff, definitely the religious facts, how they see themselves as gods. They're the chosen ones to lead the 144,000. But yet, everybody around them seems to be disappearing. Lori's children, Lori's ex-husband, Chad's ex-wife. It seems like they're eliminating everybody else, and they're just the two chosen one, and they're going to go find everybody else who's chosen in the United States and keep them. It's definitely not typical, but I think this could work with the jury.
Right. I'm with you, David. Absolutely. I say, wrap your arms around all those crazy facts and make it the motive for the jury. I mean, it is so wild. You just can't even make this stuff up. Like they say, truth is sometimes stranger than fiction. Ian, I want to ask you about whether there may be somewhat of a professional responsibility problem in this with the attorney representing Lori Vallow Daybell, Mark Means. We saw, of course, her in court the other day with him, and he represented Chad Daybell before Chad Daybell was charged. And there was a shot of him. I remember him sitting in the courtroom at one point when Lori was first dragged in after they were off in Hawaii and she was charged there and extradited, brought back in on those desertion charges. Is that potentially a problem now? Let's say prosecutors try to join these two for trial. If he once represented Chad and he's a co-conspirator, what do you think of that ethically, please?
Yeah, I remember we've talked about this earlier when the case first was brought and they were originally appearing for bond. And I found it very strange then, and I find it just as strange now that he represented both. He should not have. You clearly have the potential for an adversarial defense here. And that's why I was saying in my last comment, if I were the lawyer now for Chad, I would be moving to get him off. And one of the things that I think is very telling is when the judge asked the lawyer today, Mark Means, did you at any point represent both? What was his answer? No, I did not. And then it was corrected a moment later by the prosecutor. There's a problem there. And if he says, well, I never really spoke to Chad, then what is he saying? That he didn't really do his job when he was making representations on his behalf in court. So I have a big problem with him representing both in any case of any degree, but particularly here, we're talking of a case of this severity. It's a problem, and I think he's going to learn the hard way. He's probably going to have to be off this case.
Yes. Ian, thank you so much. Amanda Lewis, next one for you, please. In terms of how sad this case is, that the identification of those two children's remains had to be done by someone who married into the family, Brandon Boudreaux, who married Lori Vallow Daybell's niece, Melanie, who was Melanie Pulowski. I mean, these two kids, their fathers are deceased, their mother's in jail. Talk to me about what you see in terms of sadness from that case and any warning signs when these divorce filings were made last year.
Julie, like David said, everyone around these folks, it falls off. Everyone either mysteriously passes away, they die, they're murdered. So their circle gets tighter and tighter. And I think that's really concerning as we go into this trial, because the only folks that are living that know anything about all these facts behind are Lori and Chad. But looking at these divorce pleadings, she threatens multiple times to kill Charles, and that's detailed in these filings. And he did get a protection order against her at one point in time. So in February and March of 2019, he's going to this court in Arizona saying, she's threatened to kill me. She thinks she's God. She says there's going to be an angel to dispose of my body. I mean, and months later in July, he's dead and shot by her brother, who then later dies himself. So to me, hindsight is a wonderful thing. But looking back on this and looking at these divorce filings, I mean, the writing was really on the wall here. She had it out that something was going to happen to him, and she made it known to him she was going to murder him and that she would kill him. She'd destroy him financially and kill him. She was very detailed in her intention to do that. And you can never be too careful with a case like that when you're dealing with family law, because you don't know who's going to follow through on those. And that's exactly what I think she had done here.
Agreed. Excellent points. Amanda Lewis, Ian Friedman, David Otunga, thank you all so much. We want you three to kindly stay put. Want to pick your brains some more. Have to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about that missing Fort Hood soldier believed to be found dead, and the one person taken into custody today. That's next after this.
Whoever's responsible has to pay. And we demand a congressional investigation. And I need everyone's help to keep the story alive, because they claim that sexual harassment is not, apparently to them, it's not important. What about now?
Welcome back to Court TV Live. Our next story is about 20-year-old Private First Class Vanessa Guillen. Her family believes that it was her remains that were found after she's been missing since April. Court TV Live anchor Ted Rowlands has more.
They take it as a joke. My sister's no joke. My sister's a human being. And I want justice. And I want answers.
Angry and heartbroken, the family of Vanessa Guillen saying they believe that Vanessa, a 20-year-old Army soldier stationed at Fort Hood, Texas, was murdered after reporting to work back in April.
How can this happen on military base? How can this happen while she was on duty?
Searchers located human remains Tuesday, 25 miles from Fort Hood. According to the family lawyer, 2 suspects are in custody. One is the civilian wife of a soldier at Fort Hood in custody. A third suspect committed suicide early Wednesday morning in Killeen, Texas, after fleeing the Army base on foot.
As officers attempted to make contact with the suspect, he produced a weapon and committed suicide by shooting himself.
That individual who killed himself, according to Vanessa's family, was her superior, the same person they say was sexually harassing Vanessa, who she complained about in the weeks before she died.
This is that same person that we are talking about, her superior that she was with that day, that harassed her.
They claim that sexual harassment is not, apparently to them, it's not important. What about now? Because it led up to this.
Vanessa's family claim they told the Army investigators about the sexual harassment after Vanessa went missing 2 months ago, but were told at the time that sexual harassment wasn't criminal and had nothing to do with Vanessa's disappearance.
Well, guess what? We have a dead person because of sexual harassment. It is criminal.
The 2-month investigation into Vanessa's disappearance seemed to be at a standstill until the family rallied help from members of Congress last week to intervene with a meeting at a press conference at Fort Hood. Now, the family is demanding a full congressional investigation. Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard, who served 17 years in the Army, is standing with the Guillen family.
We need to know why she did not get the help that she needed when she needed it, and why this family is forced to grieve and mourn her loss here today.
Vanessa, according to her family, was living a dream she first started talking about when she was 10 years old, to serve in the United States military. Now, her family says it was the military that let her down.
Vanessa Guillen did not deserve this. And if those criminals are still out there, take my word that we will not rest, we will not stop, and we will keep fighting until you're behind bars.
Beautiful young woman, bravely serving her country, and it seems like the military and the system really failed her here. I want to bring in my think tank, get their thoughts. Still with me, attorneys Ian Friedman, David Otunga, and Amanda Lewis. Ian, I want to go to you first, please. Tell me your reaction with this news today. I mean, a lot of layers to this story. Your thoughts, and especially on the failures of the systems here.
Yeah, I mean, I think, it's tragic. Just, listening to the sister, it's really heartbreaking. But I think we're going to have to wait and see. The investigation's going to have to produce a lot more evidence before we can speculate as to what happened. I'm glad that there are 2 suspects in custody. I'm glad that people are looking at this finally. We're all hopeful that justice will be brought to the family. But my thoughts, we separate. As a person, my heart goes out to the family. As the defense lawyer that you've invited onto the show, I would say we'd have to wait and see what the evidence is. But I certainly hope that they are able to conclusively bring the criminals, those who killed her, those who murdered her, to justice. And I think that they're looking at a lot of evidence right now, and obviously the digital footprints of the two that are in custody, the one that committed suicide. There's going to be a lot of evidence to go forward, and they better get this right because they certainly dragged on the way in.
Well said, Ian. David, I want to ask you about the reporting policies. I was chatting with my colleague Ted Rollins earlier on the show, and he was talking about how the way this reporting procedures were structured for her, she would have had to go to her direct superior, who is the alleged offender, the man who was supposedly sexually assaulting her. Talk to me, please, about the problems you see with that kind of structure, and then, the command level, and what a victim of sexual harassment is to do.
Unfortunately, sexual harassment isn't something that the military takes very seriously. And this is an extremely unfortunate situation where, as you said, the person who was sexually harassing Vanessa was her superior officer, the very man she was supposed to go and report this to. So what is she left with? Not to mention, historically, when officers report sexual harassment, that's usually career ending for them. This is something that needs to change. There needs to be deep reform here. I mean, as you heard, the military doesn't even see sexual harassment as a crime. And now, today they closed in on this man. The police were going to talk to him, and he killed himself. We don't know if he necessarily had something to do, with her disappearance, although, signs would point to that. But, she said he sexually harassed her, and now he's taken his own life. Excellent
points, David. And in particular, I'm so glad you mentioned how the military, their response was sexual harassment, that's not a crime. Are you kidding me? Amanda Lewis, talk to me about how we are in the Me Too era. We're seeing so many cases where very powerful figures are being brought down, brought to justice because the law is such a great equalizer. Are you stunned that something like this is happening in the day and age we're living in?
I really am, Julie. I couldn't believe this when I first read about this story and watched some of the coverage today, because for that very reason, we are in the midst of this Me Too movement. We've seen, huge stars in one capacity or another, from, Matt Lauer to, on through Harvey Weinstein and those things. And here's our own military at the same time this movement is huge in our country, blatantly telling this family that this isn't a crime, this isn't important. I think the sister alleged that when she personally went to the superior laughed in her face. So it is beyond disturbing, as Ian mentioned, that at this point in time, with everything that's gone on in the last year, the Me Too movement, that our own military is not taking any strides to take this more seriously. And that's very disturbing, because this girl was left with no choice but to report to her direct supervisor, who was the perpetrator of this act. And it's so wrong. And it left her with no other alternative, and then unfortunately took an even darker twist and turn here for her.
Exactly. Amanda Lewis, David Otunga, Ian Friedman, thank you all so much. You're going to stay with us. Want you to stay put at home as well. A stunning case that's going to turn your stomach is next, as a child is found in a dog cage. And what's more, when officials went into that home to rescue the child, they also rescued over 600 animals. Details are next.
Welcome back to Court TV Live. I'm Julia Janae with your legal news break, starting in California, where authorities have made arrests in the disappearance of a couple missing since 2017. Jesus Ruiz Jr., Manuel Rios, and Abraham Fragoso were arrested over the weekend for the murders of Jonathan Reynoso and Audrey Moran. The sheriff's department says that the two went missing without a trace 3 years ago, considered out of character for this couple who had a good relationship with each other and their families. And while officials haven't pieced together exactly what happened and haven't revealed how they connected the suspect to the couple's disappearance, the three men now face numerous charges, including murder, and if convicted, they could face life in prison. And a multi-million-dollar settlement has been reached, and it creates a fund for the victims of Harvey Weinstein. The New York Attorney General's office announced the $19 million deal that stems from the civil lawsuit filed against Weinstein back in 2018. The class action suit claimed the disgraced movie mogul and his company created a hostile work environment for dozens of female employees. As part of the agreement, those survivors will also no longer be subject to any confidentiality or non-disclosure agreements they may have signed, meaning they can share their stories without fear of legal consequences. Weinstein is currently serving a 23-year prison sentence after his conviction earlier this year in New York. Those crimes include committing criminal sex act and rape in the third degree. He's also facing pending sexual assault charges in LA on allegations by 2 victims. And last night, the man accused of using social media to threaten a college campus has now pleaded guilty. In 2018, Daniel Rippey made a Facebook post threatening to shoot up Ohio State University and vowed to hurt football players. The electronic communication was made during a game between Ohio State and their biggest rival, the University of Michigan. Ohio won that match, and in separate messages, Rippey threatened specific players, their families, and Ohio head coach Urban Meyer. A judge will still have to decide whether to accept Rippey's plea. He faces 5 years in prison and a $250,000 fine. That's it for your Court TV News Break. Julie, back to you.
Julia, thank you so much for all of that. We want to turn now to our next big story of the night, where a child was found living in a dog cage in a trailer in Tennessee. What's more, there were also over 600 animals living in that same trailer. Our affiliate WTVF has the story.
New video from animal rescue officials showing the disturbing conditions inside a trailer home where a 1.5-year-old boy was found in a dog cage. Investigators say the room he was in had snakes and stacks of mice and rats.
They were in tanks. They were completely filled to the top with feces.
Michael Cunningham recorded the video after the boy was removed from the property in Henry County last week. With so much feces and urine, there was a strong smell of ammonia.
A complete mess. Trash on the floor, roaches everywhere. We had roaches all over us, flies everywhere.
3 people were arrested for child abuse and animal cruelty, including the boy's parents. News Channel 5 learned the toddler is now with foster parents until DCS can find relatives to take him in. While physically he's doing fine, it's not clear what impact all this had on his mental health.
I don't know how people are able to live in that environment.
More than 600 animals, from dogs and rodents to chickens and rabbits, had to be rescued. All had signs of neglect, including eye injuries, emaciation, and skin and dental disease.
It was horrible. We had dogs in the kitchen cabinets that had eaten their way in there from behind the walls.
Cunningham says all those animals are now being taken care of. They're no longer fighting for food or crammed in cages. His work here could help prosecutors in the case. Now, besides the animals, officials also found nearly 20 guns and more than 120 marijuana plants on property.
I can't wait to see what those prosecutors do with this one, and I can't wait to see what my think tank thinks about this horrific case. Still with me, trial attorneys David Otunga, Amanda Lewis, and Ian Friedman. Amanda, I want to start this one off with you in talking about that 1.5-year-old little boy living in the cage, now in foster care. You try a ton of cases in family court. What do you think life is looking like for this little child?
This poor little boy, Julie, this case is so disturbing, and to watch the video and see the cage that he was in and with toys and to know what was around him, it's just mind-blowing to me. In the level of abuse and neglect that this reaches is just absolutely crazy, and I don't know how anyone could do this to their child, let alone to all these animals that were there. So this poor little boy, you know, hopefully they can get him the psychological help that he needs, and it sounds like he physically is doing well, thank goodness, and is in foster care right now. I did read that they were trying to place him with some family members or find some other placement for this little boy, but what a terrible, terrible upbringing and start to his life that he certainly had no control over, and that's what breaks my heart about this case, both as a mom and as a lawyer, that the abuse and neglect factor of this is just mind-blowing.
You're right. It truly is mind-blowing. Amanda, thank you. We saw so many stunning facts revealed in that report, but there was one that really got to me. I think this is perhaps the most stunning. And David, I want to see what you think about this one. Apparently, when law enforcement talked to this couple, they were annoyed that law enforcement went into their home, raided everything, took all the animals out, took the kid out, put the little child in foster care, and they said that they just wanted to be free to live their lives, grow their marijuana plants, have their guns, do whatever else, free to live their lives. The child's in a cage. Tell me, that fact, first of all, what goes through your mind when you hear that fact? And then if you're on this case prosecuting them, how would you take that statement and use it against them?
This is so infuriating, just to hear that. I mean, clearly, these people are unbalanced. They're bothered that police showed up. They have animals, 600 animals everywhere. What are they doing with all those animals? But most importantly, they have a 1-year-old boy in a cage. I hate cases where I see children being abused and neglected and mistreated. I'm a father, and I have a son, and I take these kind of things personally. If you can't take care of your child, or you don't want to take care of your child, give them away, please. There's so many families out there who can't have children, who would love to take in a nice little boy and show him the love. And there's no telling what psychological damage has been done to this child who's been confined to a cage. I can only hope that he gets placed with a nice, loving foster family who can give him the love and the care that this little boy deserves.
Yes, beautifully said, David. Thank you. Ian, practicing criminal defense, you see a lot of terrible things. What jumped out at you seeing this in terms of how bad this is compared to other cases you've seen over the years? And how do you expect this one to play out? Do you think we'll actually get to a point where these co-defendants are going to want to go to trial and roll the dice and see what happens?
Well, Julia, it's a tough case, and it's tough to speculate because we don't know what the prosecution's going to offer. And in Tennessee, you've got different levels of the child abuse, aggravated, different levels, felony and misdemeanor and so forth. So it's really going to be on the prosecutor to see how they bring this case. As a defense lawyer, we're going to go to a child psychologist. They're going to talk about the fact that there probably is going to be no marked harm because of the age of the child. There are a lot of factors that are not known. How long was the child in there? These are things that are going to be looked at. Now, I have to recognize right now, as we're talking about it, it's really unpopular to say, and it's kind of a tough role to bring because as a human being, it's despicable. And one of the things that we didn't talk about was on that cage or in that cage were also the snakes and the mice and everything else going on. One of the facts, if I could switch hats for a second and be the prosecutor, first thing I'm going to say is when we talk about how this affected the child, when law enforcement came in there, they opened the cage. And what was the very first thing that child did? That child ran for the female deputy and just clung to that deputy. So this is an extremely difficult case for any defense lawyer. And I think the defense lawyer is just going to have to stick to the elements of the case, see whether or not the state can prove the seriousness to meet the aggravated factor, or whether or not this is going to be a neglect that brings it to a lower level of child abuse. I don't think they're going to escape it entirely. I think this will be about the degree to which they are either they plead guilty or are found guilty.
Most definitely. Ian, thank you. Amanda, one of the facts that came out in this case was that the ammonia levels in that trailer were so dangerously high, both for people and animals. What goes through your mind just for these investigators going in? Thank goodness for that Animal Rescue Corps in Tennessee, brave enough to go in there, and the brave men and women in law enforcement. Share your thoughts with us, please.
The idea of walking in there and the smell, and just from the video and pictures what that looks like, I can't even begin to wrap my mind around how disgusting of an environment that was. My understanding was that they got a call for alleged animal cruelty, and they had no idea they were going to find a child in this mess. So it was horrific enough what they walked into with the animals, let alone to, in the midst of this animal rescue, find this sweet little boy who's in this cage. And I think David mentioned, or Ian mentioned, that he went running for a female officer. So it leads me to believe this poor child is stuck in there for some time. And just, like I said before, a horrific case of neglect and abuse. And I cannot imagine the conditions that child was in, with snakes in the cages above him and mice and rats running around. It was truly an awfully heartbreaking situation.
You're absolutely right. Just deplorable. We can only hope that little child gets the treatment and the love that he needs. Amanda, David, Ian, thank you so much. Stay put. I want you to stay put at home, please. When we come back, the 13th juror speaks. We're talking about cult mom Lori Vallow in court, and was she actually crying? Can't wait to share your thoughts. Coming up next. Welcome back to Court TV Live. I'm Julie Grant, and this is Cult Mom in Court the other day. Also, this video is the subject of our 13th juror question of the day, because in the video, she's seen there reaching for some tissue, about to dry one of her eyes there, looks like. Is she crying? That's what we can't figure out. Is Cult Mom actually exhibiting some emotion? Was she just maybe adjusting her face mask there? Maybe she's falling victim to seasonal allergies. I don't know. That's why we asked you. You gave us so many great comments. Now it is time for the 13th juror question of the day and the comment of the day. Here we go. This one comes from Lysandra. Lysandra, thank you for writing in. She writes, quote, acting, absolutely acting. I'm a mom. If I would have known that I have done anything that would have cost the life of my child, I would have been able to hold it together all this time the way she has. She lied to her mom and sister when she knew full well that her kids were dead. Now she appears in court putting on a show. Unbelievable. I've got my brilliant think tank still with me, David Otunga, Ian Friedman, and Amanda Lewis. David, I've got to go to you on this one. You've got trial expertise, you're a Harvard Law grad, but you also have acting expertise too. So I want you to weigh in first. Do you agree with Lysandra? Do you think that Cult Mom was doing any acting in that clip we just watched?
You're right. I do have a little bit of acting experience. And yes, I agree with Lysandra. I definitely think this is acting. Lori was working for an Emmy Award here. No, I don't buy this at all. I was looking really close. I didn't see any water droplets, any moisture around her eyes. This was clearly an act. She feels that she should show some kind of remorse or something. But you got to remember, she feels like she's justified in killing and the taking of her children's lives because she's doing God's work. So don't forget that. So she feels like she's done nothing wrong.
Again, you're right, taking it back to religion, you know, the guise of religion. This is going to be key in this case, I'm sure. David, thank you. Next comment, this one comes from Debbie. Debbie said, quote, maybe reality has hit home. These beautiful children were not zombies, and she caused or played a part in murdering her children. Rest in peace, Tylee and JJ. Ian Friedman, what do you think? What was your reaction when you watched that video today?
You know, I'll be honest, I did not really have a reaction to it. I was with David throughout the majority of the program. We're going to part ways here a little bit. As horrendous as it was, she's presumed innocent. I can't tell if she was crying. And whether she was or she wasn't, it's not coming into the trial. So I understand why it outrages viewers, but it's neither here nor there for purposes of the trial. That's where I'm at tonight.
Gotcha. Appreciate it. All right, next comment comes from Shani. She said, OMG, she should get an award for her performance. Really, that evil, nasty woman doesn't deserve any kind of sympathy at all. I hope karma gets her big time. Amanda Lewis, what do you think? Do you like Shani's comment? And what do you think about the crying?
I do like her comment. You know, I think that she's putting on quite an act here. This is a woman, Julie, she's been married 5 times. Everyone around her has died. She had a simple task to produce the whereabouts of her children. Tell us where your children are, produce your kids, let us know they're safe. And she takes off with her new husband and goes to Hawaii. Like, she doesn't have a care in the world. So I absolutely do agree with the comment. I think this was an act. You know, she even turns her head away from the camera as she's trying to like dab this so-called tear, and I think she might have just been adjusting her face mask, but I really don't think she's showing any type of remorse given her background and her history here.
I'm with you. I love what you said, Amanda, about the so-called tear. I'm thinking seasonal allergies. That was my vote today when I looked at this. we were studying this video today, thinking, is she touching the face mask, or is it really a tear that she's wiping away? I'm guessing allergies. I'm thinking there's no emotion coming from Cult Mom. Let's see what Angela thinks. Angela's our next comment. She said, yeah, because she is locked up. She was fine when she had her freedom, and those innocent children were buried, and she knew all along. Say, bury her alive. Wow, Angela, not pulling any punches. David Otunga, what do you think about that comment?
I definitely agree with that. And, I want to go back. I agree with what Amanda said about when she turned her face away. So in acting, say you have a scene where you're supposed to show emotion and you're supposed to cry, but you just can't quite summon up the tears. What do? Turn your face away and cover it like this so the camera doesn't see there's no tears. So this was all an elaborate act. I don't buy any of this.
Wow. See, and we're hearing it from a professional. David, you didn't know you were going to get acting questions on the show tonight when you agreed to come on. We tap into everything here at Court TV. Let's see. We have some time for some more comments, so let's get to it. Nicole says, quote, pretty sure she wasn't crying when she was slaughtering her children. Wow. I'm thinking Nicole agrees with what we were saying earlier on the program. David, you made the point you think they're going to get to those homicide charges. Ian, what do you think when you see these comments? And people aren't really in love with Cult Mom. She's pretty unpopular. Your reaction to this last one?
It's to be expected. They're dead children. This is as serious, this is as horrid as it gets. First thing that I'm going to do is think about the voir dire, the jury selection, because we know that jurors are going to come in just like the viewers with these preconceived notions as to what occurred. So there's a lot of work ahead for the defense lawyers in this case.
Great point. And I believe we don't have time for any more. I think we're out of time. But, in some, folks are not buying the tears. That's what we learned today from all these great comments. So thank you all so much to everyone who shared a comment with us on social media. And a huge thanks to my brilliant think tank, David Otunga, Amanda Lewis, Ian Friedman. Thank you all so much for being on the program tonight, being so generous with your time and your legal expertise.
Thanks, Julie.
All right, time to say goodbye. I'm Julie Grant. It's been great being with you. As Vinnie Politan always says, don't forget to hug your kids.